Online people. If you are here, that means one thing and one thing only. You're smart. And that's the only thing it means at this point. I'm Mr. Henderson. I teach 8th grade. I teach 8th grade comp and film theory. This is Mrs. Alexander, who needs no introduction because she deals with your broken iPad like every day. We are the co-sponsors for National Junior Honor Society. You are here to figure out exactly what that means. So you all got a letter. That letter contains some information that we're going to discuss today, but essentially all that letter means right now is that you have really good grades. And that's all it means right now. So, Njhs is a national organization. That national organization has been around for almost 100 years at this point. We at FJH have our own chapter of National Junior Honor Society that was started by Mr. Sturgeon, Mr. Brovicast, Mr. Stump back in 2003. So you guys will be one of many chapters of Njhs should you choose to apply. So in order to be part of Njhs, that does come with a lot of rules, more rules than maybe you're used to. So here is kind of where we figure out who really wants to be in Njhs and who doesn't. If you don't want to, by the time we're done with this, that's okay. We're not here to force you into anything, but you have the option. So you need to demonstrate what we call the 5 pillars. The 5 pillars are scholarship, leadership, citizenship, character, and service. You need to show how you can do all of those things while you're in National Junior Honor Society. So it all starts with an application that we'll get to in a second. But as far as what those mean, if you are showing strong scholarship, it means you're maintaining those grades that you have right now that led you to get a letter. You'll have to maintain those grades until the end of your 8th grade year. That's number 1. Leadership. You are the person who people look to. You are not the person who just follows what everyone else is doing. Because if that's what you're doing, you're not a leader. But you are the person that people look to either promote change or to make something happen. So if you think that's you, then maybe that's something that you should consider. Citizenship. You are upholding the values of our community and our school. Do you think you can do that? Character. It's one thing to be a decent human being. It's one thing to go out of your way to be a decent human being. If you are an Njhs, it means you are going out of your way to be a decent human being. So if you don't consider yourself a decent human being, maybe you should have questions about that. Service. As part of Njhs, you are required to complete between now, or by the time you're accepted, between then and the end of your 8th grade year, you need to complete 40 hours of community service. And we'll talk about what that looks like. That may lead you to a few different places. A lot of the community service that we have leads us back to elementary schools. So if you have any interest in going back to your elementary school and volunteering at some of the events that you went to when you were younger, that is definitely something that is kind of a highlight of Njhs, is that people get to go back and kind of give back to that school that they went to. Or you can volunteer with different organizations around Fishers. You can volunteer with your church. There are some teachers in the building who you can get some volunteer time from. You have options. So that's something we'll get to a little bit later, but that's what it means by service. There are 3 phases to Njhs. You are currently in the first phase, which is the application. By being in this room, that does not mean that you were in Njhs. That means you have been invited to join Njhs. So there is an application that you will do. And we'll talk about that more in a second, but the first phase is the application. Basically, it's you showing us what you have done and show your ability. Okay, that can kind of give us some indicators as to who's going to be a good member and who might not be. After the application, if you succeed in that phase, if you're accepted into Njhs, there is what we call program completion. So that is where you keep maintaining the grades that you have. You keep maintaining the behavior that you have. Because if you start getting behavior referrals, you cannot be an Njhs, and we have had that happen before. You start gaining those community service hours, and you start building all of that. By the time we get to the end of your 8th grade year, so by the time we get to May 2024, you will have maintained your grades, you will have maintained your behavior, and you will have 40 hours of community service, and that's when we get to the final phase of the program, which is induction. And that's the point where you're officially inducted into Njhs. And there is a kind of a graduation style ceremony that we have. There's some certificates that you get. There's a book that you sign. Basically, you cement your place in FJH history. And that book that we have where you sign your name, those names go back all the way to 2003. So long before you guys were born. So you will truly be a part of something special that is kind of cemented forever. So those are those 3 different phases. How it works. Like I said, you are not in automatically. You do have to apply. The application has 3 different parts. There is a background section. Basically, it's you bragging on yourself. What have you done in the past? Whether it's extracurriculars you've done, volunteering that you've done in the past, what are these things that you've done that would make you a good member of NJHS?
Mr. Henderson, what if I haven't done anything?
Well, that's okay, because at this point, in 7th grade, that's what we're building towards. So if this is a stepping stone to getting you to volunteer more, that's totally fine. So on that application, if you don't have a lot of experience volunteering or a lot of experience with extracurriculars, that's okay, because we got to start somewhere. So if that's the case for you, don't be afraid to apply, because you can still apply even if you don't feel like you've done a whole lot. Just keep that in mind. Did I answer your questions, Sturgeon?
Thank you.
Good. No problem. Written responses. There are some questions on that application that you will need to answer. Your written responses will help us decide if you are going to be a solid member of NJHS. So you can see those questions whenever you get the application, but you need to have a detailed response. There are specific instructions on that application that you need to follow to the letter, because one part of being an NJHS is having good attention to detail. If you can't follow directions on an application, how can you represent NJHS here at FJH? Not sure that you can. So you have to follow those directions to the letter. The final piece of that puzzle are recommendations. You need to gather recommendations from people of your past, whether it is past teachers, whether it is past coaches, whether it is past neighbors. The only things that it cannot be a member of your family. I'm sorry, but if we cannot get a positive recommendation from your mom, then you probably don't need to be an NJHS. So you're not going to use family members. You're also not going to use any current classroom teachers. So the teachers you have right now, 2nd semester, you cannot use, because we're going to talk to them anyway and figure out what you're doing in their class. You also, last part of this, you cannot ask any members of what's called the NJHS Faculty Council. Those are the members of FJH staff that help us run this whole organization. Those people include, long list now, Mr. Sturgeon. You cannot ask him. You cannot ask Mr. Broviak. You cannot ask Mr. Stump, Mr. Baker, Mrs. Dean, Mrs. Butts, Mrs. Watson, who's an 8th grade teacher. Same with Mr. Arthur, Ms. Dietrich, Mrs. Kletch, Mrs. Cornett, nor Mrs. Alexander, nor myself. You cannot ask any of those people, because they're going to have a say whether you get in anyway. What?
Except as a coach.
Except as a coach.
Or club sponsor.
Or club sponsor. You cannot ask them as a teacher, but you can ask them as one of those things. So if you have Mr. Broviak as a coach, then you can ask Mr. Broviak. If you don't, you cannot ask Mr. Broviak, who might possibly be your coach. Don't go that route. Just, if he's your coach, great. If not, and he's your current teacher, you can't ask him. So those are the people that you cannot ask. Anyone else, I would ask, but I would also make sure that that person's probably going to give you a glowing review. If you were in 5th grade and you were in, I don't know, Mrs. So-and-so's class, and you acted a fool that entire year, you might not want to ask that teacher to write you a recommendation, because that recommendation may not be positive. Just keep that in mind. You want your recommendations to be positive if you're going to get into NJHS. All of this is outlined in that application, which you can read for yourself. You are going to turn in that application on paper. I know it's been a while since we've used that, but it's like the stuff made from trees. Occasionally we use it. Sometimes the letter that you have is an example of paper. You're going to turn in your application on paper to the person who gave you that letter. Those applications are due no later than the 9th of February. If you are a hero, I have a feeling that date's going to be different anyway. So I'll let Mr. Broviak tackle that. But for us, the 9th of February is when that application is due. If you turn in your application on the 11th of February, cool. I don't want to see it.
But what if I'm sick?
Don't be sick. Literally, stay healthy.
It's a legit question. If you are sick on the 9th, the day it's due, you don't get in. That's why you do not wait to the last minute. It's
Better
the
have
thing that
somebody
we
drive
have
in
set
and
up. If you are the kid that waits to the last minute to turn a thing in and then you are sick that day, sucks to be you.
Could
You're
my
out.
mom just bring it?
That'd be fine.
Oh, okay.
But that means we have permission to give you flack for the next year that your mom had to bring in your application. So don't be that person. So don't be sick and don't be lazy. Those are your first two rules for Njhs. If there are recommendations, that recommendation form is going to be on paper, but if you send that recommendation forms to other teachers and people to complete, they can send that directly back to me. And my email's on that recommendation form, so you don't have to turn in your recommendations on paper. If you have them on paper, great, turn them in with your application. But if you have recommendations that can be submitted via email to me, that's totally fine.
So I'm gonna reiterate that because it goes to the whole idea of getting your application in. You do not wait to turn in your application. You do not wait for your letters of recommendation. You cannot control the letters of recommendation. You can control when you hand them to people. The part of the application that is you filling it out and doing the writing, when you're done with that, you turn it in. Okay? Don't wait on the letters. Get the application in. Because you may not get the letters yourself. If they give them to you later, and then you just come and go, here's my letter of recommendation, and we'll add it to the application.
If your application doesn't have those letters, whether they're attached to your application or they come to me, we will know. And we will let you know if that's the case and say, hey, just so you know, you probably want to revisit this because we don't have your recommendations. So it's not going to be this big mystery of there are or not recommendations. We will let you know.
Okay.
And I'm going to turn this over to Mrs. Alexander, who's going to tell you, no, well, no, I'm not.
Just about letters of recommendation. You need 2 of them. Don't just send, I would recommend sending it to like 3 people, maybe 4. Do not send it to 10 people. A couple years ago, we had somebody get like 9 letters of recommendation.
I threw, I think, 7 of them away.
Okay? But you might just limit it to 3, because then you might get 2, and if you get 3, great. But if you send out 3 and you get 2, that's awesome. If you send out 2, you only get 1, you're 1 short. Does that make sense? All right, so you might think of the 3 people you would send it to, and if we get all 3 of those, great. But if we get 2 of the 3, then you're good. I don't know if that's what something you were going to say.
No, and we'll just kind of keep going along that path of you need to be planning ahead, and it is better to get started early. Do not wait until the last minute. So immediately be asking people for those recommendations. Don't wait until February 8th to ask people to fill out a recommendation for you, and it's due tomorrow.
We'll get emails from those teachers and go, just clarifying, when did they find out about this? Because I just got notified and they asked me to turn it in for tomorrow. And we'll tell them, okay, yeah, it was, a month ago, and they just chose to wait.
So, yeah, and even tell them, and so don't even worry about sending
Yeah.
in that recommendation. We don't want it.
We don't want it.
That has told us enough about you. So making sure you're planning ahead. The other one is February 9th, that application is due, and it is on paper. I've seen lots of you in the library scrambling to print inquiry project papers at the last minute. On February 9th, you will not be scrambling to print anything in the library at the last minute to turn it in. Okay? You have to plan ahead. You may use the library to print things, but you better be there before February 9th in order to do that. Okay? Because part of being an NJHS is thinking ahead, planning ahead, and really being representative in that way. So once you get everything in, when are you going to find out whether or not you are part of this amazing group? If you're accepted, you'll receive another letter like the one that you have, and that will invite you back to another BEST meeting.
If you're not accepted, you'll get a letter too.
Correct.
You get
Yes.
a letter no matter what.
Yeah, so you're looking for your letter. It'll tell you to come meet with us at BEST again. That'll be, it takes a couple of weeks, so it'll be next month when those letters, in February when those letters go out. So wait on that. In that letter, you will be, if you are accepted, then you will be invited to join us for a leadership night on Friday, February 24th, and it is known as Super Happy Fun Night.
Their acronym.
Right
their name,
now,
not
if
us.
you are considering applying, put February 24th on your calendar, write that date down. That is a key night, and the further you can tell your parents about that night ahead of time, the better. Now, if you're sitting there going, I'm not going to apply, then don't worry about it. But if you're planning on applying February 24th, you need that date. It's an after school until about 11 o'clock that night.
And why do you need to be there? Well, because the evening is spent doing a lot of activities where you'll get to know other members in the chapter, where you will have times to show us what kind of a leader you are and how you work with groups. That is important is because at the end of the night, we will be electing our board, our president, vice president, and so forth. And that's what these goofy looking 8th graders are right up here. This is our current board of our leadership, and they were elected Super Happy Fun Night. You cannot be elected to be a leader in NJHS if you are not at Super Happy Fun Night, and you also must be there the entire night in order to be elected, because that is done at the end.
So what that means, guys, to be an officer, if you are on the board, if you are an officer, that means you're probably going to have a little bit more responsibility. Or everyone represents NJHS at FJH. These people really do. So these are the people that we turn towards if there is an issue with the chapter, if there's someone who's having issues with their hours. We look to these people first. There are some tasks that these people have taken on. There's some separate meetings that we have, and they have a little bit more responsibility. So if that's something that you're interested in, that's kind of what it looks like. But that's what it means whenever you elect officers on Super Happy Fun Night.
Should you apply? Somebody said no. You know what? I love that. Please don't. I'm going to start with the no. It said on here we've listed yes, but let's start with no. Why would you walk away from this opportunity? You're not interested. And that'll save us a lot of time having to track you down next year to make sure that you're maintaining your service hours and grades and all that kind of stuff. If you're not interested, that's absolutely fine. Thank you for coming today, and good luck on everything else.
I will also throw out there the grades. The grade that got you here is based on your first semester grades. Okay, you had to have a certain GPA to hit in order to get this letter, which is why some people did not. If anybody asked you why didn't I get a letter, they didn't have the first semester grades that matter. Semester, what matters? Here's what I will tell you. Historically, that you just had your best grades in junior high. Okay? So rarely do people have lower grades and bring them up. Many of you will maintain your grades. Some of you, if you're sitting there going, wow, I didn't think my grades were that great, that may be something to consider, because there's a chance that they're going to drop. And if they drop, then you get on probation and potentially are removed. So that is something to consider if you don't think academically you're going to be able to maintain. If you're like, I can't believe I've never gotten anything academic in my life, and now I have. Maybe you're getting better at things, but maybe it was just easy because Bro got grades easily. I don't know.
Okay, so you're not interested. You think that the academics will be too hard to keep up. You're already feeling overwhelmed with academics, or you're already feeling overwhelmed by extracurricular activities, and you are thinking there's no way I can add 40 hours of service to what I'm already doing. Maybe you honestly just don't feel like you're mature enough to keep up the good behavior as time goes on, right? Because that's another piece that we're going to look at. But definitely do not join NJHS because you would like to win favor with Sturgeon, Stump, or Brovia. That's not a good reason to do it. Don't join NJHS because your parents think it's a good idea for you to join NJHS. Because your parents aren't the ones who are going to have to do the studying, and your parents aren't the ones who are going to have to do the service hours, and your parents aren't the ones who are going to be here in school having to maintain good behavior. So it really needs to be a decision that comes from you, something that you are truly interested in, because then you're going to actually put forth the effort to make it work. So why would you do it? Well, you want to represent excellence here at FJH. You want to be challenged. You're a kid who likes a challenge. You enjoy doing community service already, so now you might as well have a good place to log those hours. You feel you can keep up with the academics, and that won't be a problem for you, and you feel like, well, there's no way I'm going to be getting in trouble anytime soon, so I'll check that one. The behavior piece is easy for me. So if those things are all in alignment for you and you think, yes, this is something I would like to do, for me, myself, then we encourage you to fill out those applications, ask for those recommendations, and get everything turned in for us.
Guys, I cannot emphasize enough, this is a you decision. It is not your parents' decision. We've had issues with that in the past. It is not your parents' decision. Consider this your first big person decision. You are not relying on your parents to decide yes or no, because whenever we communicate things about NJHS, we're going to communicate them to you. We're not going to communicate them to your parents. Your parents aren't in NJHS. You are, or might be. So, make this a you decision, but make this a decision that you are honestly comfortable with. And if you are someone right now who is talking when I'm talking, don't apply, because you clearly can't already handle the behavior to be in this. What is going on right now? The officers, along with some other people, are handing out a sheet that looks like this. It has a QR code on it. That QR code, that is how you accessed the application. There's also some other instructions on there, so make sure you read that carefully. If you are interested in applying for NJHS, go see one of those people with green paper.
And those of you that have questions, talk to me or Brovicast.